Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and today we're going to start chapter 17, Climax and Disintegration of the Mughal Empire. So let's get started with the first paragraph, the problem of succession. The last years of Shah Jahan's reign were clouded by a bitter war of succession among his sons. There was no clear tradition of succession among the Timurids. The right of nomination by the ruler had been accepted by some of the Muslim political thinkers, but it could not be accepted in India during the Sultanate period. The Timurid tradition of partitioning had not been successful either and was never applied in India. Hindu traditions were not very clear in the matter of succession either. According to Tulsidas, a contemporary of Akbar, a ruler had the right of giving the tika to any one of his sons, to any one of his sons. But there were many cases among the Rajputs where such nomination had not been accepted by the other brothers. Thus, Sangha had to wage a bitter struggle with his brothers before he could assert his claim to the Gaddi. The growing trend towards a struggle for the throne among brothers was a cause of concern to Shah Jahan during the latter part of his reign. Four of his sons, Dara, Suja, Aurangzeb, and Murad, had been carefully trained for government and in the art of warfare. They had been placed in command of important campaigns as was the Mughal practice and entrusted with the responsibility of looking after the affairs of different provinces in the empire. Each of them had proved to be able and energetic. Suja and Murad had made a mark for bravery, but were slothful and ease-loving. Dara was known for his liberal views in the matter of religion and was a pattern of learning. He was affable, he was affable and had won over the confidence of his father, who leaned on him increasingly for advice in matters of government. But Dara was vain, with little actual experience of warfare and, as events proved, a poor judge of human character. On the other hand, Aurangzeb had proved to be a good organizer and an able commandant and a shrewd negotiator. By paying court to individual nobles, both Hindu and Muslim, he had won over many of them to his side. Thus, from the outset, the real contest appeared to be between the eldest son Dara and the third son Aurangzeb. Towards the end of 1657, Shah Jahan was taken ill at Delhi, and for some time his life was despaired of. But he rallied and gradually recovered his strength under the loving care of Dara. Meanwhile, all kinds of rumors had gained currency. It was said that Shah Jahan had already died, and Dara was concealing the reality to serve his own purpose. After some time, Shah Jahan slowly made his way to Agra. Meanwhile, the princess Shuja in uh, Bengal, Murad in Gujarat, and Aurangzeb in the Deccan had either been persuaded that these rumors were true or pretended to believe them and made preparations for the inevitable war of succession. Anxious to avoid a conflict between his sons, which might spell ruin to the empire, and anticipating his speedy end, Shah Jahan now decided to nominate Dara as his successor. Wali Ad, Wali Ad He raised Dara's mansab from 40,000 zar to the unprecedented rank of 60,000. Dara was given a chair next to the throne, and all the nobles were instructed to obey Dara as their future sovereign. But these actions, far from ensuring a smooth succession as Shah Jahan had hoped, convinced the other princes of Shah Jahan's partiality to Dara. It thus strengthened the resolve for making a bid for the throne. It is not necessary for us to follow in detail the events leading to the ultimate triumph of Aurangzeb. There were many reasons for Aurangzeb's success. Divided counsel and underestimation of his opponent by Dara were two of the major factors responsible for Dara's defeat. On hearing of the military preparations of his sons and their decision to march on the capital, Shah Jahan had sent an army to the east led by Dara's son Suleiman Shikoh and aided by Mirza Raja Jai Singh to deal with Shuja, who had crowned himself. Another was sent to Malwa under Raja Jaswant Singh, the ruler of Jodhpur. On his arrival in Malwa, Jaswant Singh found that he was faced with the combined forces of Aurangzeb and Murad. The two princes were intent on a conflict and invited Jaswant to stand aside. Jaswant's instructions were vague. Shah Jahan had instructed him to bar the advance of the princes to the capital and to persuade them to go back, and in any case to avoid entering into a military conflict with them. Jaswant could have retreated, but deeming retreat to be a matter of dishonor, he decided to stand and fight, though the odds were definitely against him. This was a mistake on his part. The victory of Aurangzeb at Dharmat on 15th April 1658 emboldened his supporters and raised his prestige, while it dispirited dispirited Dara and his supporters. So there was a conflict for the there was a conflict, or we can say the war for succession going on between the four brothers, who, like the son of Shah Jahan, which are Dara, Shuja, Aurangzeb, and Murad. And in this conflict, we could see that Dara held a much superior position because he was much more closer to Shah Jahan, and it was assumed and it was said that because of the partial situation, Shah Jahan will most probably favor his son, and he also did by ensuring him a seat next to the throne, which led to more resentment within his other sons. And eventually, there was a war for succession going on from all the three sides. From Bengal, it was Shuja; from the Gujarat, it was Murad, and from the Deccan it was Aurangzeb. So he sent various armies within the patronage of Shah Jahan to counter the other forces of his sons in order to establish Dara as as the future sovereign ruler after Shah Jahan. Meanwhile, Dara made a serious mistake. Overconfident of the strength of his position, he had assigned for the eastern campaign some of his best troops. Thus, he denuded the capital Agra. Led by Suleiman Shikho, the army moved to the east and gave a good account of itself. It surprised and defeated Shuja near Banaras in February 1658. It then decided to pursue him into Bihar as if the issue at Agra had been already decided. After the defeat of Dharmat, express letters were sent to these forces to hurry back to Agra. After patching up a hurried retreat, Suleiman Shikho started his march to Agra from his camp near Monghir in eastern Bihar. But it was hardly likely that he could return to Aurangzeb in times for the conflict with Aurangzeb. But it was hardly likely that he would return to Agra in time for the conflict with Aurangzeb. So, what Dara did in the position of overconfidence was he sent most of his major troops and his good troops to the east to counter Shuja, whereby neglecting the capital of Agra. And at the same time, Murad and Aurangzeb, who have already defeated Jaswant Singh, came to forefront and they were about to attack Agra. So there was summons sent for Suleiman Shikoh, who was the son of Dara, to retreat faster to Agra, but it was not possible for him to make up to that time and uh, be present at the time of conflict with Aurangzeb. After Dharmat, Dara made frantic efforts to seek allies. He sent repeated letters to Jaswant Singh, who retired to Jodhpur. The Rana of Udaipur was also approached. Jaswant Singh moved out tardily to Pushkar near Ajmer. After raising an army with the money provided by Dara, he waited there for the Rana to join him. But the Rana had already been won over by Aurangzeb with a promise of rank of 7,000 and the return of Parganas seized by Shah Jahan and Dara from him in 1654 following a dispute over the fortifying Chittor. Aurangzeb also held out to the Rana a promise of religious freedom and favors equal to those of Rana Sanga. Thus, Dara failed to win over even the important Rajput Rajas to his side. So, Aurangzeb was actually allying the Rajput rulers by giving them certain promises and gifts of religious freedom and giving them ranks at par with their contemporary Rajput rulers. The Battle of Samgarh 29th May 1658 was basically a battle of good generalship. the two sides being almost equally matched in numbers, about 50,000 to 60,000 on each side. In this field, Dara was no match for Aurangzeb because Aurangzeb was mostly a master in warfare, which Dara was not. The Hadajat Rajputs and Saids of Barha, upon whom Dara largely depended, could not make up for the weakness of the rest of the hastily recruited army. Aurangzeb's troops were battle hardened and well led. Aurangzeb had all along pretended that his only object of coming to Agra was to see his ailing father and to release him from the control of the heretical Dara. But the war between Aurangzeb and Dara was not between religious orthodoxy on the one hand and liberalism on the other. Both Muslim and Hindu nobles were equally divided in their support to the two rivals. We have already seen the attitude of the leading Rajput rulers in this conflict, as in so many others. The attitude of the nobles depended upon their personal interest and their association with individual princes. A suggestion had been made to Shah Jahan before the Battle of Samugad that he should either go to Aurangzeb and persuade him to go back or take the field in person. It is doubtful if the former course would have had any effect, relations between father and son having been embittered earlier. But by refusing to take the field in person, Shah Jahan virtually ensured that whoever won the reins of power would no longer be held by him. Aurangzeb forced Shah Jahan into surrender by seizing the source of water supply to the fort. Shah Jahan was strictly supervised and confined to the female apartments in the fort, though he was not ill treated. There he lived for 8 long years, loving nursed by his favorite daughter, Jahanara, who voluntarily chose to live within the fort. She re-emerged into public life after Shah Jahan's death and was accorded great honor by Aurangzeb, who restored her to the position of the first lady of the realm. So Shah Jahan was basically confined to the female apartments by Aurangzeb, and there was a cutting of water supply. They were Aurangzeb was trying to establish himself as the sovereign, and he actually did. Uh, he was taken care of by Princess Jahanara, and she only emerged after uh, Shah Jahan's death into the public life, and she was restored as the first lady of the realm and was given a greater position by Aurangzeb after Shah Jahan's death. He also raised her annual pension from 12 lakh rupees to 17 lakh. According to the terms of Aurangzeb's agreement with Murad, the kingdom was to be partitioned between the two. But Aurangzeb had no intention of sharing the empire. So, as we've seen earlier, Aurangzeb and Murad both made a coalition and they both marched together in order to defeat the forces at Agra. And they had a general agreement between themselves that they would partition the empire. But Aurangzeb literally had no intention of partitioning it and wanted to establish the empire for himself only. But Aurangzeb had no intention of sharing the empire. Hence, he treacherously imprisoned Murad and sent him to the Gwalior jail. He was killed 2 years later. After losing the Battle of Samugad, Dara had fled to Lahore and was planning to retain control of its surrounding areas, but Aurangzeb soon arrived in the neighborhood leading a strong army. Dara's courage failed him. He abandoned Lahore without a fight and fled to Sindh. Thus, he virtually sealed his fate. Although the civil war was dragged on for more than 2 years, its outcome was hardly in doubt. Dara's move from Sindh into Gujarat and then into Ajmer on invitation of Jaswant Singh, the ruler of Marwar, and the subsequent treachery of the latter are too well known. So there was a subsequent treachery. The Battle of Deorai near Ajmer was the last major battle Dara fought against Aurangzeb. Dara might well have escaped into Iran, but he wanted to try his luck again in Afghanistan. On the way in the Bolan Pass, a treacherous Afghan chief made him a prisoner and handed him over to his dreaded enemy. A panel of juries, a panel of jurists decreed that Dara could not be suffered to live out of necessity to protect the faith and holy law, and also for reasons of state and as a destroyer of public peace. This is a typical This is typical of the manner in which Aurangzeb used religion as a cloak for his political motives. 2 years after Dara's execution, his son Suleiman Shikho, who had sought shelter with the ruler of Garhwal, was handed over by him to Aurangzeb on an imminent threat of invasion. He soon suffered the same fate as his father, like he was also executed. Earlier, Aurangzeb had defeated Shuja at Khajwa near Allahabad. Further campaigning against him was entrusted to Mir Jumla, who had steadily exerted pressure till Suja was hounded out of India into Arakan in April 1660. Soon afterwards, he and his family met his honorable death at the hands of the Arakanese on a charge of fomenting rebellion. So, one by one, Aurangzeb made sure that the other three brothers were out of sight and out of life. The civil war, which kept the empire distracted for more than 2 years, showed that neither nomination by the ruler nor the plans of division of the empire were likely to be accepted by the contenders for the throne. Military forces became the only arbiter for succession, and the civil wars became steadily more destructive. After being seated securely on the throne, Aurangzeb tried to mitigate to some extent the effect of the harsh Mughal custom of war to the death between brothers. At the instance of Jahanara Begum, Shikhir Shikho, son of Dara, was released from prison, given a mansab, and married to a daughter of Aurangzeb. Murad's son Ikkat Baksh was also released, given a mansab, and married to another daughter of Aurangzeb. Earlier in 1669, Dara's daughter Jani Begum, who had been looked after by Janara as her own daughter, was married off to Aurangzeb's third son, Muhammad Azam. There were many other marriages between Aurangzeb's family and the children of and the grandchildren of his defeated brothers. Thus, in the third generation, the families of Aurangzeb and his defeated brothers became one. So, in order to conciliate his relations within his family, he started the matrimonial relations between his daughters and the children and grandchildren of his deceased brothers. Aurangzeb's reign and his religious policy. Aurangzeb ruled for almost 50 years. During his long reign, the Mughal Empire reached his territorial climax. At its height, it stretched from Kashmir in the north to Jinji in the south, and from the Hindu Kush in the west to Chittagong in the east. Aurangzeb proved to be a hard-working ruler and never spared himself or his subordinates in the task of government. His letters show the close attention he paid to the all affairs of the state. He was a strict disciplinarian who did not spare his own sons. In 1686, he imprisoned Prince Muazzam on a charge of intriguing with the ruler of Golconda and kept him in the prison for 12 long years. His other sons also had to face his wrath on various occasions. Such was the awe of Aurangzeb that even late in his life, when Muazzam was governor of Kabul, he trembled every time he received a letter from his father. Daddy issues. Unlike his predecessors, Aurangzeb did not like ostentation. His personal life was marked by simplicity. He had the reputation of being an orthodox, God-fearing Muslim. In course of time, he began to be regarded as a Zinda Peer or a living saint. Historians are, however, deeply divided about Aurangzeb's achievement as a ruler. According to some, he reversed Akbar's policy of religious toleration and thus undermined the loyalty of the Hindus to the empire. According to them, this in turn led to popular uprisings which sapped the vitality of the empire. His suspicious nature added to his problems, so that, in the words of Khafi Khan, all his enterprises were long drawn out and ended in failures. Some other historians think that Aurangzeb has been unjustly maligned, that the Hindus had become disloyal due to the laxity of Aurangzeb's predecessors, so that Aurangzeb had no option but to adopt harsh methods, and to try to rally the Muslims on whose support in the long run the empire had to rest. A new trend has, however, emerged in the recent writings on Aurangzeb, and efforts have been made to assess the Aurangzeb's political and religious policies in the context of social, economic, institutional developments. There is little doubt that by temperament Aurangzeb was an orthodox Sunni Muslim. He was not interested in philosophical debates or in mysticism, though he did not debar his sons from dabbling in Sufism. While taking his stand on the Hanafi school of the Muslim law, which had been traditionally followed in India, Aurangzeb did not hesitate in issuing secular decrees called Zawabit. A compendium of his decrees has been collected in a work, Zawabit-e Alamgiri. Theoretically, the Zawabits supplemented the Shara. The Shara is the law, Muslim law. In practice, however, they often modified the Shara in view of the conditions obtaining in India, which were not provided for in the Shara. Thus, apart from being an Orthodox Muslim, Aurangzeb was also a ruler. He could hardly forget the political reality that the overwhelming population of India was Hindu and that they were deeply attached to their faith. Any policy which meant the complete alienation of the Hindus and of the powerful Hindu Rajas and Zamindars was obviously unworkable. In analysis Aurangzeb's religious policy, we may in analyzing Aurangzeb's religious policy, we may take note of what have been called moral and religious regulations. At the beginning of his reign, he forbade the kalma being inscribed on coins, lest a coin be trampled underfoot or be defiled while passing from hand to hand. He discontinued the festival of Nowruz, as it was considered a Zoroastrian practice favored by the Safavid rulers of Iran. Muhtasibs were appointed in all the provinces. These officials were asked to see that people lived their lives in accordance with the Shara. Thus, it was the business of these officials to see that wine and intoxicants such as bhang were not consumed in public places. They were also responsible for regulating the houses of ill repute, gambling dens, etc., and for taking weights and measures. In other words, they were responsible for ensuring that things forbidden by Shara and Zawabit's secular decrees were, as far as possible, not flouted openly. So these were muhtasibs, and their functions are described as follows. They were basically the officials who made sure that the Shara law was followed and the secular decrees, which were the Zava based given by Aurangzeb, they were also made popular and they were also followed by the general public. In appointing Muhtasibs, Aurangzeb emphasized that the state was also responsible for the moral welfare of the citizens, but these officials were instructed not to interfere in the private lives of citizens. Later in the 11th year of his reign in 1669, Aurangzeb took a number of measures which have been called puritanical, but many of which were really of an economic and social character and against superstitious beliefs. Thus, he forbade singing in the court, and the official musicians were pensioned off. So it is said that these new measures which he took in his 11th year of reign were really of an economic and social character and were against a superstitious belief. But the irony is he forbade the singing in the court and the official musicians were pensioned off. Instrumental music and Naubat, the royal band, were however continued. Singing also continued to be patronized by the ladies in the harem and by individual nobles. It is of some interest to note that the largest number of Persian works on classical Indian music were written in Aurangzeb's reign, and that the Aurangzeb himself was proficient in playing the veena. Thus, the jibe of Aurangzeb to the protesting musicians that they should bury the buyer of music they were carrying deep under the earth so that no echo of it may rise again was only an angry remark. Aurangzeb discontinued the practice of Charuka Darshan, or showing himself to the public from the balcony, since he considered it a superstitious practice and against Islam. Similarly, he forbade the ceremony of weighing the emperor against gold and silver and other articles on his birthday. This practice, which was apparently started during Akbar's reign, had become widespread and was a burden on smaller nobles. But the weight of social opinion was too much. Aurangzeb had to permit this ceremony for his sons when they recovered from illness. He forbade astrologers to prepare almanacs, but the order was flouted by everybody, including members of the royal family. Many other regulations of similar nature, some of moral character and some to instill a sense of austerity, were issued. The throne room was to be furnished in a cheap and simple style. Clerks were to use porcelain inkstands instead of the silver ones. Silk clothes were frowned upon. The gold railings in the divaniyam were replaced by those of lapis lazuli set on gold. Even the official department of history writing was discontinued as a measure of economy. So these historical accounts are very limited and because the official department of history writing was discontinued. To promote trade among the Muslims who depended almost exclusively on state support, Aurangzeb at first largely exempted Muslim traders from the payment of cess. But he soon found that the Muslim traders were abusing it, even passing off the goods of Hindu merchants as their own to cheat the state. So Aurangzeb reimposed the cess for Muslim traders but kept it at half of what was charged from others. Similarly, he tried to reserve the post of Peshkars and Karolis, petty revenue officials, for Muslims, but soon had to modify it in the face of opposition from the nobles and lack of qualified Muslims. These and other steps of a similar nature do not necessarily denote growing Puritanism on Aurangzeb's part. The motives were different, as we have noted, but as in the case of the execution of Dara, Aurangzeb thought it prudent to back up his decisions by seeking the approval of the clergy. This when Aurangzeb was keen to crown himself after Samughal, he felt he could not do so legally till his father is alive. The chief Qazi at the court was not prepared to give a decree that it was legal for Aurangzeb to ascend the throne in this situation. Finally, Abdul Wahab, who had been a Qazi in Gujarat and had joined Aurangzeb in the Deccan, silenced the Qazis by arguing that since Shah Jahan was very weak because of his age and his faculties were affected, and that the tranquility and the welfare of the people had suffered a setback, the reading of khutbah in the name of the Son, who is capable of ruling over the Sultanate, is permissible according to Shara. So he was basically trying to amend the religious scriptures in his own favor because when Shah Jahan was already alive and was the ruler and he wanted to ascend to the throne, he was not actually permitted by the chief Qazis. So he brought in Abdul Wahab, who was a Qazi in Gujarat, who had already joined him in Deccan to silence the other Qazis and bring into consideration that since the ruler was not keeping off well and there was a son who would take care of the sultanate very well and who is capable of taking care of the sultanate, so it is in favor and it is in lines with the Sharia law to read the khutbah in the name of Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb rewarded Abdul Wahab by making him the chief Qazi of the empire. This style of justifying political, economic, and other actions by reference to the Shara or seeking the approval of the clergy was an undesirable trend. It appears that Aurangzeb wanted to have the clergy on his side since the clergy still exercise a powerful hold on the minds of men. A modern historian, Sir Jadunath Sarkar, had has suggested that Aurangzeb wanted to pose as an orthodox Muslim in order to make the public forget his Aurangzeb wanted to pose as an Orthodox Muslim in order to make the public forget his harsh treatment of his father. However, public prudence and Aurangzeb's own personal beliefs might have led him in the same direction. We may now turn our attention to some of the other measures of Aurangzeb, which may be called discriminatory and show a sense of bigotry towards people professing other religions. The most important was Aurangzeb's attitude towards temples and the levying of jizya. At the outset of his reign, Aurangzeb reiterated the position of the Shah regarding temples, synagogues, churches, etc., that long standing temples should not be demolished, but no new temple allowed to be built. Further, old places of worship could be repaired since buildings cannot last forever. This position is clearly spelled out in a number of extant farmans he issued to the Brahmanas of Banaras, Vrindavan, etc. Aurangzeb's order regarding temple was not a new one. It reaffirmed the position which had existed during the Sultanate period and which had been reiterated by Shah Jahan early in his reign. In practice, it left wide latitude to the local officials to the interpretation of the words long-standing temples. The private opinion and sentiment of the ruler in the matter was also bound to weigh with the officials. For example, after the rise of the liberal-minded Dara as Shah Jahan's favorite, a few temples had been demolished in pursuance of his order regarding temples. Aurangzeb, as governor of Gujarat, ordered a number of temples in Gujarat to be destroyed, which often meant merely visiting the images and closing down the temples. At the outset of his reign, Aurangzeb found that images in these temples had been restored and idol worship had been resumed. Aurangzeb therefore ordered again 1665 that these temples be destroyed. The famous temple of Somnath, which he ordered to be destroyed earlier in the reign, was apparently one of the temples mentioned above. However, it does not seem that Aurangzeb's order regarding ban on new temples led to a large-scale destruction of temples at the outset of the reign, as Aurangzeb encountered political opposition from a number of quarters such as Marathas, Jats, etc. He seems to have adopted a new stance. In case of conflict with local elements, he now considered it legitimate to destroy even long-standing Hindu temples as a measure of punishment and as a warning. So earlier he described that you could not demolish or destroy the long-standing temples and just don't build new temples. So in that, while trying, so that in that order, there were no construction of the new temples, and there was idol and images which were destroyed in the long-standing temples as well as we could see in the case of the temple of Somnath, which was destroyed. But later, when he got into fights with the other rulers like the Marathas and Jats, he found it legitimate and uh, good as a punitive action to destroy even the long-standing temples, and this would seem off as a warning or a punitive action against the Hindu rulers. Further, he began to look upon temples as centers of spreading subversive ideas, that is, ideas which were not acceptable to the orthodox elements. Thus, he took strict action when he learned in 1669 that in some of the temples in Thatta, Multan, and especially at Banaras, both Hindus and Muslims used to come from great distances to learn from the Brahmanas. So basically, destroy all the secular centers. Aurangzeb issued orders to the governors of all provinces to put down such practices and to destroy the temples where such practices took place. As a result of these orders, a number of temples, such as the famous temple of Vishwanath at Banaras, the Kashi Vishwanath temple, and the temple of Keshav Rai at Mathura, built by Bir Singh Deobundela in the reign of Jahangir, were destroyed and mosques erected at their place. So this is the historical evidence of how Aurangzeb's policy led to the destruction and demolition of major Hindu temples, which are the Kashi Vishwanath temple at Banaras, and instead of the temples, the a mosque was erected at that place. Similarly, the temple of Keshav Rai at Mathura, built by Bir Singh Deobundoila in the reign of Jahangir, which was also destroyed in Aurangzeb's reign in consonance with his orders. The destruction of these temples had a political motive as well. Mustaid Khan, the author of Masir-e Alamgiri, says with reference to the destruction of the temple of Keshav Rai at Mathura, on seeing this instance of the strength of the emperor's faith and the grandeur of his devotion to God, the proud Rajas were stifled and in abasement they stood like images facing the wall. It was in this context that many temples built in Orissa during the last 10 to 12 years were also destroyed. But it is wrong to think that there were any orders for the general destruction of the temples. But the situation changed during the periods of hostilities. Thus, during 1670 to 80, when there was a state of hostility with the Rathors of Marwars and the Ran of Udaipur, many temples of old standing were destroyed at Jodhpur and its Parganas and at Udaipur. So here's a paragraph on Mustaid Khan. Mustaid Khan, who earlier wrote his history of Aurangzeb in the early 18th century and who had been closely associated with Aurangzeb, further asserts that the motive of Aurangzeb's order was to establish Islam and that the emperor ordered the governors to destroy all temples and to bar public practice of the religions of these misbelievers, and that is the Hindus. If Mustaid Khan's version was correct, it would have meant Aurangzeb going far beyond the position of the Shara, for the Sharia did not ban the non-Muslims from the practicing their faith as long as they observed certain conditions such as loyalty to the ruler, etc. Nor we have found any farmans to the governors or the lines suggested by Mustad Khan. Okay, so these are long accounts of the destroying of temples. In his policy towards temples, Aurangzeb may have remained formally within the framework of the Shara, but there is little doubt that his stand in the matter was a setback to the policy of broad toleration followed by his predecessors. So Aurangzeb would have uh, had many orders, and it seemed that he was trying to actually disseminate the religious toleration and the religious integration which was done by his predecessors like Akbar during their reign, and that religious toleration policy was totally in bits. It led to a climate of opinion that destruction of temples on any excuse would not be condoned but would be welcomed by the emperor. While we do have instances of grants to Hindu temples and much by Aurangzeb on the whole, the atmosphere generated by Aurangzeb's policy towards Hindu temples was bound to create disquiet among larger sections of the Hindus. However, it seems that Aurangzeb's zeal for the destruction of temples abated after 1679, for we do not hear any large-scale destruction of temples in the south between 1681 and his death in 1707. But a new irritant, the jizya, or the poll tax, was introduced in the interval. We have already explained the background of jizya and its introduction in India by the Arab and Turkish rulers. According to the Shara, in a Muslim state, the payment of jizya was wajib, obligatory or wajib for the non-Muslims. Akbar had abolished it for reasons that we have noted. However, a section of the Orthodox theologians had been agitating for the revival of jizya so that the superior position of the Muslims, including the theologians, could be made manifest to all. We are told that after accession to the throne, Akbar contemplated revival of jizya. Aurangzeb contemplated revival of jizya on a number of occasions but did not do so for the fear of political opposition. Ultimately, in 1679, in the 22nd year of his reign, he finally reimposed it. There has been a considerable discussion among the historians for Aurangzeb's motives for the step. Let us first see what it was not. It was not meant to be an economic pressure for forcing the Hindus to convert to Islam or for the coincidence was too light. For its incidence was too light, women, children, the disabled, and the indigent, that is, those whose income was less than the means of subsistence, were exempted. So, the jizya was not meant to be an economic pressure for forcing the Hindus to convert to Islam, for its incidence was too light. So, like, this was not an economic pressure on the Hindus so that they would convert to Islam, because the people who are actually going to pay jizyas were the ones who could actually pay it after deducting their subsistence rates. Like if you if you earn lesser than a subsistence, you would be exempted from paying the jizya. For example, the women, the children, the disabled, and the indigent, whose income was less than the means of subsistence, were exempted, as were those in government services. So the government people who were serving the government were also exempted from paying the jizya. nor in fact did any significant section of Hindus change their religion due to this tax. Secondly, it was not a means of meeting a difficult financial situation. Although the income from jizya is said to have been considerable, because obviously we know there was a vast Hindu majority in the empire, Aurangzeb sacrificed a considerable sum of money by giving up a large number of cesses called abwabs, which were not sanctioned by the Shara and were hence considered illegal. So the abwabs, which were not very much given the patronage of the Shara, were hence considered illegal. The reimposition of jizya was in fact both political and ideological in nature. So we could see that they have condemned, the historians have condemned the economical prospects of um, asserting the jizya taxes on the non-Muslims, and they have reasserted the reimposition of jizya as that of a political and theological in nature. It was meant to rally the Muslims for the defense of the state against the Marathas and Rajputs who were up in arms, and possibly against the Muslim states of the Deccan, especially Golconda, which was in alliance with the infidels. Secondly, jizya was to be collected by honest, God fearing Muslims who were specially appointed for the purpose, and its proceeds were reserved for the ulama. So, what we could infer from the above paragraphs is that the jizya was basically collected in order to rally the Muslims with the in order to rally the Muslims within the empire, so that they could face the wrath and the upcoming uprisings from the Rajput and Maratha rulers, and also from the uprisings in the Deccan, um, mainly by the Golconda rulers. It was thus a big bribe for the theologians, among whom there was a lot of unemployment. But the disadvantages outweighed the possible advantages of the step. It was bitterly resented by the Hindus, who considered it as a mark of discrimination. Its mode of collection also had some special features. The payee was required to pay it personally, and sometimes he suffered humiliation at the hands of the theologians in the process. Since in the rural areas jizya was collected along with the land revenue, only well-to-do Hindus in the cities were subjected to these practices. We therefore hear of a number of occasions where Hindu traders shut their shops and observed hartal against the measure. In a number of instances, the aim of the Amin or collector of jizya was killed. But Aurangzeb was unrelenting and was reluctant to grant exemptions for payments of jizya to the peasants, even when religion and land revenue had to be given on account of natural calamities. So he was very much as a crude ruler in matters of accepting the jizya. He wanted to collect it from even the small peasants whose uh, produce was on an verge of extinction because of the natural calamities, and who earned less than the means. Were eventually exempted, but he was reluctant in collecting the payment of jizyas. Some modern writers are of the opinion that Aurangzeb's measures were designed to convert India from Darul ul Harb, or a land of infidels, to Darul ul Islam, or a land inhabited by Muslims. Although Aurangzeb considered it legitimate to encourage conversion to Islam, evidence of systematic or large scale attempts at forced conversions is lacking, nor were Hindu nobles discriminated against. A recent study has shown that the number of Hindus in the nobility during the second half of Aurangzeb's reign steadily increased, till the Hindus, including Marathas, formed about one third of the nobility of as against one fourth under Shah Jahan. On one occasion, Aurangzeb wrote on a petition in which a post was claimed on religious grounds. What connection and what right have worldly affairs with religion? And what right have matters of religion to enter into bigotry? For you is a religion, for me is mine. If these rules listed by were established, it would be my duty to extirpate all Hindu rajas and their followers. Thus, Aurangzeb did not try to change the nature of the state, but reasserted its fundamentally Islamic character. The Aurangzeb's religious beliefs cannot be considered the basis of his political policies, while an orthodox Muslim and desirous of upholding the strict letter of law, As a ruler, he was keen to strengthen and expand the empire and hence did not want to lose the support of the Hindus to the extent possible. However, his religious ideas and beliefs on the one hand and his political and public policies on the other clashed and on many occasions, and Aurangzeb was faced with difficult choices. Sometimes this led him to adopt contradictory policies which harmed the empire. A state in which laws of Islam prevailed and where the ruler was a Muslim was Darul Islam. In such a state, the Hindus who submitted to the Muslim rulers and agreed to pay jizya were zimmis or protected people according to the Shariat. Hence, the state of India had been considered a Darul ul Islam since the advent of the Turks. Even when Mahadji Sindhya, the Maratha general, occupied Delhi in 1772 and the Mughal emperor became a puppet in his hands, the theologians decreed that the state remained a Darul Islam since the laws of Islam were allowed to prevail and the throne was occupied by the Muslim. So, Darul Islam is a term given when a state is ruled by the Muslim and the laws of Islam are prevailed. In such a state, the Hindus who submitted to the Muslim ruler and agreed to pay jizya were zimmis or the protected people according to Shariat. The conversion of large sections of the population to Islam in Kashmir had taken place apparently during the 14th-15th centuries and has been noted in the earlier chapter. So, the political developments in North India. During the War of Succession, many local zamindars and rajas had withheld revenue or started plundering the neighboring areas, including Mughal territories and royal highways. After seating himself on the throne formally, Aurangzeb embarked upon an era of strong rule. In some cases, such as the northeast and the Deccan, the imperial frontier was advanced. However, in general, Aurangzeb did not embark upon a forward policy. His first attempt immediately after his accession was to reassert imperial authority and prestige. This included recovery of areas which had been lost during the War of Succession and to which the Mughals felt that they had a legal claim. To begin with, Aurangzeb was more concerned with the consolidation than the conquest and annexation. Thus, he sent an army to Bikaner to enforce obedience to the Mughal emperor but made no effort to annex it. But in another case, such as Palamau in Bihar, the ruler who was accused of disloyalty was dispossessed and the bulk of his state annexed. The rebel Bundela chief Champat Rai, who had been an ally of Aurangzeb at first but, um, but had taken to a life of plunder, was relentlessly hunted down. But Bundela lands were not annexed. So with this, it's a massive chapter, and I'll see you guys in another video with the continuation of the part 2 of the chapter on climax and disintegration of the Mughal Empire. Till then, see ya. Bye.